I'd like to specially greet with enormous gratitude our panel members. The President of the Senate and Senator Mauricio Liscano, who was also a victim of the conflict, and so he has a moral authority to speak about this subject, and to greet with affection Carlos Holmes Trujillo, who has been participating vigorously in the debates related to the peace process and the plebiscite we're going to vote on next Sunday. I have agreed with the panel members who will make use of the floor for 20 minutes, giving us a general formulation or telling us about their position. As you know, they are in different places, and this is what gives wealth to democracy, to have a vision among which the citizens could elect. So, would you please start? And again, thank you.
Tiempo tentativo.
Muy buenos días a todos. En primer lugar, pues, un saludo muy afectuoso a esta convención, a todos los aseguradores. Un agradecimiento al doctor Jorge Humberto Botero por la amable invitación. A Carlos Holmes Trujillo también un saludo muy afectuoso. Colombia en los últimos 52 años ha tenido 267.000 muertos producto del conflicto interno, 50.000 desaparecidos, 8 millones de víctimas. Luego hemos dicho, es indudablemente un imperativo ético hacer la paz. El objeto final de cualquier sociedad claramente es defender la vida de sus ciudadanos. Pero también hemos dicho, es un imperativo estratégico.
That it is a strategic imperative. At least during the last 20 years, we have gone around FARC. There were votes for President Andrés Pastrana because he proposed to Colombians that he would achieve peace. Then for Dr. Uribe because he set a policy of democratic security against FARC. And then Juan Manuel Santos also made a bet for peace. So if you go through the political history of Colombia, FARC either directly or indirectly have set the political priorities, and that cannot be so in a country that has so many challenges and so many ambitions, with such important leaders as the ones we have. We cannot spend all our energy and all our work in establishing policies of war and peace. So for our country, it is very strategic for FARC to end. If we're able to end FARC, and there was an important talk by Dr. Clavijo, I have the summary here, it's quite clear that we can devote many of our expenditure efforts to focus on more important priorities. If we end with FARC, we have to vote for the plebiscite. The first thing is that if we vote yes, FARC will end because they will stop being revolutionary, armed, and of existing. So those who are going to vote yes have that objective to end FARC. The ones who say no are saying that FARC should continue, that we should remain in the same conflict. And we don't think that it's possible to reformulate the agreements today. This was said by the Constitutional Court. The decision of the people is binding. We're a year away from the presidential elections. We can't reformulate it. So the best strategy to end FARC is to say yes to the plebiscite. And that would generate enormous opportunities for our country. I won't mention them here, but it would also generate enormous economic savings. Colombia today is the second white country that spends the most in defense. We are undergoing a military career. After Russia, Colombia is the country which, in relation to its economy, spends more on defense. If we were be able to refocus those resources and reallocate them to other sectors of the economy, education, roads, secondary roadways, we would have a better country. So it's best to have peace rather than war, but are the agreements good or bad? The bad thing, the first thing we have to say is that in these agreements, the government system of our country was not negotiated. Clearly, we're not changing from a democracy to socialism or to a Castro-Chavistic state. Nowhere in the agreements can you see that this is a transit to eliminate the fundamentals of our constitution, the three public branches, the executive, the judicial, that they will remain. The principles of our constitution will remain the same. Nothing in the agreement will change the model of government or our economic model. We're not eliminating free enterprise. We're not eliminating private property. There is nothing that attempts against the business areas. For example, expropriation. They say you're going to expropriate land or companies. The only thing in that article is that the land fund will be nourished with the land that used to belong to narco traffic and with the expropriation in the public interest with an indemnification. That's what we have today in the law, so there's nothing that really changes the economic model. There are only 6 points that are very important. The first is agricultural development. If you go through the topic of agricultural development, there's nothing strange there. 3 million hectares for farmers, a land bank that will be nourished with the land that used to belong to the narco traffic, of land belonging to the government or land that could be bought by the government. There will be a registration in the cadastre of all the land. There are many properties not registered. The cadastral subject is extremely important for the economic development of Colombia. I will not go in depth into that. As you well know, the rural cadastre, the multi-purpose cadastre is extremely important. More subsidies, that is basically what's included. That is actually what is included in the chapter of agricultural development. If you look at it, you don't find anything different. If you look at subjects related to land concentration, 5% owns 90% of the land in Colombia. So if you look at this, there's nothing strange in relation to the agricultural development. The second topic is to end narco traffic. What is so strange if the main cartel, the drug trafficking cartel, the FARC, will commit before the country to end narco traffic? That has nothing strange. Everyone agrees that narco trafficking must end, and they should, quote unquote, become an ally of Colombia in manual eradication and in the delivery of the routes. The third subject is victims. They should be repaired, or there should be forgiveness. There should be no right of repetition, so there's nothing that's strange. But the two subjects that generate the greatest controversy are the following. One is the justice one. They've said that this is a peace process without penalization. Any guerrilla member who committed crimes against humanity will go to court, will be investigated, will be condemned. If they comply with certain requirements of the justice courts, which are quite clear. One is to say the truth, to give in the resources obtained illegally, to deliver the routes. I mean, the center of that agreement is the truth. If they tell the truth, if they give in the routes, the resources, if they repair the victims, if they ask forgiveness, because that could be part of the sentences or the decisions made by the courts, they will have penalties for 5 to 6 years. But if they lie, if they don't give in the money, if they take some money for themselves, if they don't repair the victims, if they don't give in the routes, if they don't say where the people who disappeared are, well, they will be jailed between 15 and 20 years. So it's not true that they are going to be that they won't go to jail. They would go to jail between 15 and 20 years. So there is justice. Justice exists. It's transitional. It's restorative. They could even pay their crimes in jail. So one of the big myths is false. They will, if they don't say the truth, they will pay with a restriction of freedom between 5 and 8 years. Among other things, in Colombia, our judicial system has many benefits for those who confess a crime. If you confess, you will pay half your time. It happened with the military, who only paid with 8 years of jail and who had committed great crimes. In the U.S., the discussion at their Congress about people who don't pay any time in jail, who have benefits if they confess, who have a new identity and so forth. So this process is clearly a process of justice. If they commit to not do any more crimes, if they will deliver their routes and so forth. And you say, well, that's too good. What is the concession the government's making? It's not a concession. It's just an agreement for them to be able to participate in politics, to deliver their weapons in order to participate in politics. All the peace agreements in the world talk about that, to change the weapons for votes, to change the boats you wear shoes for votes. And what this is about is for them to be eligible after going through the transitional course, after complying with all the different requirements. And the fear of FARC is so large, the fear of being elected by the people, because it'll be difficult. Because of the damage they've made, no one is going to vote for these commanders who have done so much harm. And for example, if you put two politicians, the one who has damaged no one, and the one who has kidnapped, the one who has not done anything bad, and the one who has, who will the vote be for? The Colombian citizens know who is the good guy and who's the bad guy. And in politics, things are very demanding. There's a permanent scrutiny about what the politicians do. So for them, it won't be easy to be elected, since that was the fear they had on the negotiations. In relation to elections, it was agreed with them that they would be given, or guaranteed rather, 5 seats in the Senate, 5 in the chamber. Out of the 22, it's not that they'll have them for free. They will have to go through the electoral process. They will have to go through the votes. If they get 3, they'll be given 2. If they have 5, none will be granted. And that's not a concession. I mean, today, in Congress, there are guerrilla members who are participating in politics. Antonio Navarro Wolf, the Democratic Center, who is making so much criticism, has one ex-guerrilla member, Ever Bustamante. You might agree or not with Petro, but he was also a guerrilla member. So this is not strange, it's not new to have guerrilla members participating in politics in Colombia. And 5 seats, I am the president of the Senate, 5 seats between 160 seats will not give them a majority. They won't be able to change a model or to have much influence in Congress, but they will have to be tracked. They will have to be the center of public opinion and of the communication media, and that will oblige them to follow the regulations. So it's important for them to have that in order to have an objective different from weapons. So this is a good peace agreement. And I am saying this, as Jorge Humberto said, I am a victim of FARC. My father was kidnapped 9 years by FARC, and my brother was kidnapped for 6 months. And I've said, I support this peace process because clearly I don't want my children, and I have 3 children, and Emilio, Alejandro, and Guadalupe, I don't want them to go through what I went through. How can we not want our children to live in peace? No matter how much efforts we make from the defense standpoint, we can't have a police person or a public order person custodying each of the 45 million of Colombians. And this is a very efficient way of saving resources, of not continuing in the armed career or armed competition towards the future. We need to set better priorities to save lives and to have our children live in peace. So that's why I say yes, we are in the peace process. We are accompanying it with enthusiasm and dedication, and you don't have to be a scientist or a member of the court to understand things that are quite simple in the life of humanity. Love will be always better than hate. Union will be better than dispersion, hope than fear, and undoubtedly for a society, it will always be better to have peace and not war. Thank you very much. Senator, thank you very much for your presentation. The tones are very contrasting, black and white. I'd like to give you a warm greeting, to thank FASECOLDA for its generosity and of its president, Dr. Botero, for inviting me. I'd like to greet with respect and affection the president of the Senate, all of the attendees, the members of the media. I see my great friend Oscar Dario Perez. I'd like to give him a warm greeting. Allow me to tell you, first of all, that I talk about this subject very humbly, because here no one owns the truth, the revealed truth. No one can proclaim himself to be the exclusive, the sole owner of absolute certainty. And that, of course, leads me to reflect on these subjects with respect and consideration. What is convenient for a country that needs collective efforts to make it? As a context, or part of the framework, it's good to point out that I am aware that we're in the midst of a process that has part of the traditional and part of the new. What is traditional? Colombia has lived through several negotiation experiences with illegal armed groups. Some have been successful. In other cases, the efforts made in various governments were not able to reach the desired point of a sustainable agreement. But in this case, there are new elements. It is necessary to take them into consideration because if we don't do so, there might be confusions about what is being discussed for next Sunday. What's new? The political global scenario has changed. When the Rome Statute came in to effect after the application, the enforcement of all of its clauses related to the sustainability or non-sustainability of the agreements entered into in relation to those aspects that have to do with justice. If it was done in South Africa, Ireland, Central America, why can't we do it here? That's not an appropriate consideration, and it's not because when those procedures took place, the Rome Statute had not become effective, the essential content I want to remind you of before coming into the talk as such. And I'll remind you because what it says about justice is extremely important. Over 130 governments signed the Rome Statute. They committed to investigate and judge those responsible for the most serious crimes, crimes against humanity and war crimes. They also committed to accept that the International Penal Court must assume its subsidiary competence or venue in case the national authorities don't do it because they don't want to or they're not able to do it. And I would like to underscore that don't want to, because in relation to that specific point, the reason behind it does not matter. The International Penal Court was not created by that many states to assist in the national peace processes nor to hinder them. It was created to build or to get efficacious or efficient mechanisms for those processes. We all want peace in this country. We all want FARC to disappear as an illegal armed force. We want that the weapons they have and have used against Colombians be held by the UN. That's a good point of the agreement. It's foreseen inside the agreement. We all want kidnappings to cease, massacres, recruiting of children, sexual assaults against women, but thousands and thousands of Colombians do not agree with the fact that the main responsible for the worst crimes don't pay one single day of privation of liberty, not even one. And thousands of us do not agree that those same people accountable of these crimes could be elected immediately. And thousands of us are not in agreement with the fact that narco-traffic could be considered a crime connected to the political crimes. And because of the competencies of the Court for Peace that is being created under the umbrella of the special peace jurisdiction, and thousands of us have questions and doubts, because the totality of the agreement, and listen to me well, the totality of the agreement shall be incorporated into the national constitution with an unrevisable nature. It cannot be modified. In relation to that reality, what are we asking Colombians? We're asking Colombians to vote no. Why? To end the effort? No. To get up from the table and go out running? No. To go to have the international community leave and let Colombia alone? No. To give an ending point to work that has had positive effects? No, that's not thinkable. We're asking you to vote no, to continue building on what has been already built. And I will explain the legal, political, social, and collective need logistics behind this position I am defending. In relation to the issue of justice, the main accountable for the most serious crimes will not have to pay one day in jail. That doesn't seem to us to be good because it's a bad message for the nation. It would make the agreement be unsustainable internationally because of the following reason. All of the debate related to this point is centered in the following. The main accountable for the most serious crimes who accept their responsibility in a timely manner will receive as a sanction the restriction of liberty under special conditions. Those same people who accept their responsibility extemporarily, they will be sanctioned with the privation of their liberty, the same that would happen to those who don't accept their responsibility and be subject to a contradictory judgment and be condemned. There will be judgments, there will be condemnations, there will be sentences, but we have to talk about the core of the issue. The main accountable for the crimes will not pay one single day of jail. They will only have a restriction of liberty. Why? Because the agreement, why could the agreement become unsustainable under those circumstances? Because the International Penal Court pointed out that the sanction for those people who would be investigated and judged by them, they would have 30 years of jail. It could become perpetual, plus additional penalties, the seizure of their assets, and fines. It is true, Mr. Senator, that does not make the governments who signed that agreement liable. But what happens under these circumstances when the different sentences or the judgments are produced for the main accountable of the most serious crimes? That is what the International Penal Court is going to look at, because that's what interests them. And when they do that investigation, what will they find out? They'll see if those sanctions imply an accountability process, or if the penalty is sufficient, or if it implies a personal appearance before justice. If they believe that it is being complied with, they will not intervene, but if they believe that it's not complying, they could assume their subsidiary competence. And what could happen if they assume that position in that moment? The agreement would incur into a stability risk that would be extremely damaging to our nation in the future. They've said it's a ghost, it's not true, that everything has been foreseen. Most respectfully, I have to contradict those affirmations. When that time comes, if the government is complying with their obligations or not, we would look at the criteria. What is the international tradition in terms of this type of crimes? The court will find the clarity that they've always been punished in Colombia with prison.
And also for prolonged periods. And to this, one adds what I already mentioned regarding the sanction provided by the Statute of Rome for said crimes. It would be too dangerous for the country, I reaffirm, and a poor message, a bad message, that in practice would be a disguised impunity, because in Colombia, Colombia is always punished with different sanctions or different sentences, the commission of said crimes. And it's not good for the country that they can be immediately elected. Now, here they say, well, here are those guys who are advocating for the no, denying their participation in politics, when that's not the debate, dear friends. The debate is not their participation in politics. In fact, throughout the years, every time Colombia has had processes of this nature, the organizations that have signed these agreements with the administration in turn ultimately joined the political life with more or less fortune. That's not what's in discussion here. What we're arguing is that the perpetrators of the most terrible crimes, should not be elected immediately. If one of you, God forbid, is guilty of one of those crimes and is sentenced for that, you'll never be able to be elected. So why not allowing eligibility after the sentences, the corresponding sentences are met? They say, no, there will be sanctions, there will be sentences, the judges will be there, but the agreement says between the government and FARC that no sanction, regardless of the sanction, will imply the inability for exercising said rights and participating actively or passively in the elections. And we don't think that's good. For drug trafficking to be considered a political crime, what's going to be the international message and the message for our present and future generations? The drug traffickers of FARC will not pay a single day of jail time, and they cannot be extradited. But in addition, those in FARC who are good family members were able to get it be stated in the agreement that this inability to be extradited covered their first blood relations, the first and second generations by blood relation. And the expansion of the competencies of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, this new court that will be created will have in temporal competencies, who knows, 20, 25, 35, any years. In second place, this court will investigate the direct and indirect authors of crimes committed because of the conflict, and there's no definition of what's the direct authorships of said crimes. This court will have the competency to investigate the conduct of the crimes committed in the context of the crime. And it doesn't define what indirect authorship of a crime committed under the conflict. So this court can make its own juridical qualifications, different from the qualifications done by fiscal or administrative authorities. That is, it will have the capacity to create new criminal types. This court will be a prevalent, exclusive court of closing. This court as well will be fed by reports from the Colombian judicial authorities, but also from the reports of victims organizations and human rights organizations. That is, the competence of this court is so broad that it could become a true source of juridical insecurity for Colombian citizens. And regarding the judges that are going to hold such high positions or have such high responsibilities, today, nobody knows. Nobody knows what is the incompatibility and inability regime, what are the criteria to be assigned or used to determine who such high judges will be truly objective and independent. And one doesn't know yet what is the sanctionatory regime, which should be very strict considering the consequences of the exercise that on the juridical security of Colombians, the competency they will have. And we should all worry. Yes, Colombians vote for the yes on Sunday will be in the realm of prospective justice. And you wonder, well, what is that? I wouldn't have an answer, because it's a theoretical creation of a Uruguayan professor who maintains in the document in which he offered for consideration of the academic community this prospective jurisdiction and the total incorporation of this agreement to the Colombian Constitution. Here in practice, we will have the terms of two constitutional statutes, Constitution of 1991, which is subject to modification. In fact, it's been modified since we enacted it in 1991. And the one that was born in the unedited constituyente in Cuba, because in Havana a new juridical creation arose that will have one characteristic, that it is unmodifiable, that is untouchable. It will see its birth in Colombian life with perpetual term. All these considerations and others that come to the case in the interest of time make us decide to vote no in order to modify in what's necessary. It is said that all of this is not true. No, if that happens, FARC will come to the Hilton Hotel, to the Fasecola conference, and kidnap all of you. And they say, no, that's very dangerous, because the international community will run off, and what an embarrassment when they have helped us so much. What is the reasoning behind this statement? In the agreement, my dear President of the Senate, it reads that in order to close the differences the government and FARC had regarding the confirmation mechanism, it was to accept the decision mechanism determined by the Constitutional Court with the characteristics this court determined, quote unquote. In the agreement, it says that the government and FARC agreed to accept what the Constitutional Court said. And what did the Constitutional Court said? It said the result of this plebiscite is binding on the president as a political mandate. What did it say in the second term? If the yes wins, the president has to set in motion all the necessary mechanisms to implement the agreement. And what did the court say if the no won? If the no wins, the president cannot implement such agreements, but he has the entire powers to execute agreements with unlawful armed groups, in this moment with FARC. And additionally, the court recalled the nature of the participatory mechanisms. I understand, and here I open a parenthesis, that this is one of the big issues this debate has. A citizen, due to the lack of experience it has regarding participatory mechanisms, still does not know clearly his true power that day. The court wants to remind it and states that when a citizen is convened to participate in these types of mechanisms, it will give a mandate. It's not going to give an idea to the president to see if he thinks it's good. It's not going to make a reflection for the head of state to see if he likes it or not. It's going to put on the table some ideas for him to accept those he feels are good and rejects or discards those that are not. No, the court that day is going to give a mandate. What the Colombians decide that day is what the president has to do. And then one wonders, well, what would happen with FARC? Well, the agreement's right there. The government and FARC previously accepted the participatory mechanism defined by the Constitutional Court, in addition with the characteristics this high court pointed out. So what then is the true decision to be made on Sunday? We all want peace, and we all want to see the disappearance of FARC as an unlawful armed group. So on Sunday then, what is the mandate? If the yes wins, we will be telling the president, Mr. President, go that way and implement the agreement. And if the no wins, because that day a new political reality would be created, one would be telling the president, President, make an effort, continue building upon what's been built with the purpose of attaining a better agreement for Colombia by amendments, precisions, additional signing of agreements. That it's difficult? Yes, it's difficult. That there's uncertainties? Yes, there's uncertainties. There's very big uncertainties relating to the yes. It was already said brilliantly by Mr. Clavijo earlier. What is going to happen when it comes time to implement the agreements? And he asked himself with reason, or is this being erected upon the basis that afterwards we're going to trick FARC? What happens if the agreements need to be reformed given the fiscal capacity of the country to fulfill all the programs and provisions that are established therein? And with respect to the no, there are also uncertainties. But here we have to aim at hope and the true expectation. Do we believe an additional effort can be made? Do we believe additional efforts should be made based on what the government and FARC have already agreed, based on what the national constitution says, and based on the sentence by the Constitutional Court? I believe one can. I sincerely believe that in this case, the hopes and the sustainability of the agreement would emerge from a victory of the no, to conceive an agreement that brings Colombians together, that includes more Colombians, and that is truly sustainable in time in order for us to advance in a true stable peace building that Colombian citizens want and the country demands.
Bien. Me parece que queda claro que
I think that it is very clear that in the opinion of Mr. Carlos Holmes Trujillo, the dilemma, peace or war, is not adequate, and what he has done is giving us reflections regarding the text. I will now give the floor a 5-minute reply to Senator Liscano to make the comments he feels appropriate. A very brief reply. I used less time than Mr. Holmes Trujillo, but now I want to balance. Yeah, but you have warned me we could. Well, the first is the constitutionality block. Mr. Trujillo has said that having signed the agreements, this will be included automatically in the Constitution and the law. That is not true. That is false, and I say it respectfully. If it were so, then once signed the agreements, then it wouldn't make any sense for it to go to the Senate for us to implement or modify them through legislative acts. It is not true that these agreements signed with FARC will become part of the constitutionality block. It is true that Congress plays, and I say it as President of the Senate, once the agreements are signed, once this plebiscite is voted on, it will be Congress which, through laws, acts, or the powers of the President, will regulate and implement the agreements. Secondly, it's that we're being sold this thing as the International Penal Court is saying that we're doing things against the international community. That is not true either. The prosecutor Besuda, she's already been in Colombia. She was here a month and a half ago. I urge you to go into the webpage and read her declarations she made regarding these agreements. It says that there cannot be impunity. That is clear. That these crimes, serious crimes, crimes against humanity, cannot be amnestied. It is very clear in the agreements that these crimes cannot be amnestied, and the prosecutor has said it several times. It is the states, the ones who impose the sentence. You said it yourself in your speech. And it is very clear here. There's a transitional justice that privileges truth, the surrender of weapons, and the surrender of assets, that privileges reconciliation. And this is a justice that's entirely compatible. The truth is, this is a peace process that we're in. With impunity and violating human rights, well, Europe would not be supporting it, which is the main defender of human rights. The U.S. Supporting it, and the international community. I don't think the entire international community is going to come together to accept a violation of the Treaty of Rome and the laws. This court, this is part of the United Nations system, and the United Nations is one of the main supports the peace process has today. You saw Ban Ki-moon the day it was signed, and I don't think Ban Ki-moon, the United Nations, and the most important countries then will come together against Colombia, like they're trying to say here, to violate or breach the Treaty of Rome and the International Court. That's impunity. Impunity is what exists today, or how many sentences does Timoshenko have? Like 44. That is impunity. Having them out in the jungle is impunity. They have not been arrested, they have not been punished, that they've been 52 years in arms. That is real impunity. The rest is a better and elaborate attorney's speech or discourse. And can the agreements be changed? And that, I say it respectfully, is the greatest truth upon which the debate about Sunday is happening. How can you even think that the agreement can be changed when the court said it was binding? Second, that we're in a year of presidential election. Third, and it's been said in all the negotiations that when the parties get up from the table, they always have more radical positions. But we had the best negotiators ever. Mr. De la Calle is a great negotiator. General Naranjo, General Mora, Sergio Jaramillo, our Minister of Foreign Affairs. It is a group of negotiators that's extraordinary. Do you think we'd be capable again of sitting another 4 years for what type of agreement? What Centro Democrático says, in my opinion, sounds really good. It's like music to someone's ears, but it is very musical, but it is not real. Let's sign the agreement with FARC, but then send FARC to jail. 7,000 armed men, surrender your weapons, and then go to jail. Tell me, who's going to do that, really? Secondly, they cannot participate in politics. Make peace, we want peace, but you cannot participate in politics. And third, I don't know what other conditions you've heard. That's not a real peace. So upon this, what level of agreement is there? So therefore, I believe that saying yes or voting yes is saying yes to peace with some issues, yes, but in the trade-off that it's better to have peace or to continue in the conflict, of course it's better to have peace, or voting no, which is a sort of mystery or a puzzle that people don't understand, and it is a threat. No, if that happens, we'll continue in the conflict we're living in today. Thank you, Senator. Let me ask a couple of questions. There is no doubt that the international community has supported the peace process in Colombia. Is it that the international community is wrong from beginning to end? Let me answer this, and if you allow me, Jorge Humberto, I have some replies to the President of the Senate, which are substantial to this debate. International community, listen, I have been ambassador of Colombia in many countries for many years, and in that capacity I have had to seek support from the international community for peace processes that occurred in the past with success, not because of my efficiency, but because the international community always reacts that way. You have 5 minutes. Every time an effort is set in motion, the international community says we have to support the effort by President so-and-so in Colombia. So it's good to have the support of the international community in Colombia, but the support is not to the exact terms of the agreement. It's a theory that's being made up that is not true. And regarding the international criminal law, I have to say very respectfully to the President of the Senate that I disagree with him. What did the prosecutor say? She said, we welcome peace in Colombia. Well, of course. In fact, the institution is part of the United Nations system. What else did this prosecutor say? It's great that there's no amnesty for those guilty of the crimes. Yes, of course, it's wonderful. But what else did it say? She said, the sanction imposed to be imposed individually to the perpetrators of said crime. There has to be true accountability. There has to be an effective sentencing and a genuine appearance before justice. I will continue helping within my competencies. What does this mean? This means that if the specific sanctions imposed at a determined moment do not meet those requirements that the prosecutor of the International Penal Court, she will intervene because that is her obligation according to the standards of the Rome Statute. The Constitutional Bloc, I'm truly sorry, President of the Senate, but I'm going to explain to you exactly what I mean. I did not say it entered directly. I said that it is going to be part of the constitutionality block. I know this plebiscite has political effects, not juridical. I know that on Sunday, people will not incorporate the agreements to the constitutionality block. That will be done by Congress. That's perfectly clear to me. But what is the Congress that we have? A Congress that has no initiative. A Congress that will not be able to modify anything at all. A Congress that the only thing they can do will be to approve or disapprove, and a Congress that gave extraordinary powers to the president. That is, everything that's in the agreement will be approved by Congress by virtue of the majorities the government has there. That's a fact. And then it says there will be automatic control by the Constitutional Court. What control is this court going to do? If once incorporated into the constitutionality block, this agreement, the Constitutional Court will have to give a statement based on the contents of the agreement. Consider this. All of this is a juridical creation full of smoke, made up by signing the agreement as a special agreement, secondly, incorporating it to the constitutionality block, and thirdly, depositing the agreement in Bern and making it a unilateral declaration in the United Nations. What for? For it to be changed at any time in Congress? No. Those are the elements of the juridical armoring that the government and FARC agreed on. With what purpose? Well, for nobody to touch them. That is the purpose this has. Because FARC, of course, need to have security from a physical and political and juridical standpoint. False? No. Why falsehood? What are the participatory mechanisms? I understand there is insufficient clarity about this because in the practice it's the first time we're going to be voting a plebiscite in Colombia, even though we did it in 1957 at a time where it was not truly a plebiscite. It is there. That's the power of the people to give a mandate to the president, and the government and FARC said they would accept that when they pointed out that they would abide by what the Constitutional Court said, and it's not false. On the contrary, here we're operating with a foundation, with rationale, based on what the Constitutional Court says and its sentence. There are other things, but I want to be very respectful with the time. Well, indeed, this debate of so much hierarchy and intellectual elevation could continue for hours, but many of our attendees are taking early flights to Bogota, and President Uribe, who will speak in the closing session, is already in the hotel. So sadly enough, but with my deepest gratitude, I want to thank you for participating in our Congress. Individuals like you help improve democracy and illustrate our...
Data Crédito Experian ofrece soluciones especializadas para aseguradoras. Solución para calificación de intermediarios. Permite a las aseguradoras calificar el comportamiento crediticio y comercial de sus intermediarios a través de información relevante y veraz y dando cumplimiento con la circular número 050. Solución para suscripción riesgo personas. Aporta la información de comportamiento crediticio como variable relevante en el proceso de fijación de precios. Solución SARLAFT. Agiliza el proceso de captura y actualización de datos, dando cumplimiento a la normatividad de conocimiento de clientes. Solución suscripción cumplimiento. Permite agilizar la suscripción de las pólizas de cumplimiento a partir de la información que suministra sobre riesgo crediticio y comportamiento comercial. Solución segmentación. Incorpora variables de estilo de vida y nivel de endeudamiento para el diseño de campañas más focalizadas y efectivas. Solución identificación de fraude. Genera alertas al momento de la suscripción basadas en los hallazgos de la información.